Way back on the 3DS, I was young. Since I was young, I never finished many games. Back then, I didn't even understand the concept of beating games, completing everything, or grinding out side content. Since I was so young, I just played games. I would spend hours on the same level, exploring the same worlds, or going back and forth on the same route. I played games, but I wasn't truly engaging with the world. When you're young, you don't have ideas about what to do in a game unless it's explicitly outlined, or at least that's how I was. So on the 3DS, the number of games I beat, meaning reached the credits of, was minimal for a long time. I could probably count them on one hand. Back then, if a game was slightly challenging, I'd just drop it for a month or even a year, eventually picking it up again and playing for a few more hours. I think on the hardware, I know for a fact, back then, I beat Mario 3D Land, New Super Mario Bros. 2, and Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. All three of those games I liked, or thoroughly enjoyed. For some reason though, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon meant more to me. I don't know why, but I've always liked Luigi's Mansion as a series. I remember being in a summer camp when I was even younger, and for some reason a group of people, myself included, pretended we played Luigi's Mansion. This would have likely been around the release of Dark Moon, maybe a year or so before. The dates are a little hazy. I don't know why I went along with this. I didn't own a DS, or a 3DS, or any Nintendo platform. I knew of Nintendo and Mario as a brand, a character I owned toys of, a series of some cartoons we rented, and something my friends talked about, which because of osmosis, I also talked about. I had a strict childhood, so I wasn't really allowed to play any video games, including family titles like Mario or Pokemon. I observed gaming as a medium through my friendships, TV, merchandise, toys, and in Pokemon's case, the anime series and the card game. I have memories from my childhood where I talk about Mario, or play New Super Mario Bros. For the first time on someone's DS, or when we rented and watched the old movie, or when I watched the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, or the old Mario Bros. 3 in World cartoons, or going out to the store and buying the newest Mario toy set, or building a Mario playset. These have been fond memories of my life. I always liked Mario, even if I hadn't played it yet. Eventually, for Christmas, I received a 3DS XL. This would have been in 2014. I was given the console with Pokemon Omega Ruby, and would later get Mario 3D Land. I never beat Omega Ruby, although I was close. I did beat Mario 3D Land, but it would take years. At some point, after the Switch release, I beat more games on the system. I was more of an avid gamer by that point in time, and could easily beat a Rayman game, or Kakarot's Uprising. One of those games I finally beat in my twilight years on the platform was Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. I first got it in early 2017, years after launch and close to Switch's release. I was still young though, so I had a lot of trouble getting through the game. It probably took me 2 years to beat it, but once I beat Dark Moon, I felt accomplished. I somehow put 42 hours into the game. Something weird to think about because the campaign is well under half of that. Of course, I also played loads of Scarescraper, both all by myself and sometimes with download and play, the best feature Nintendo's ever made. Finally, I finished the game, the same Luigi's Mansion game that had inspired my friends to pretend it was real. A couple of years after, I bought Luigi's Mansion 3. I'd enjoyed the predecessor and wanted to play the sequel. I was extremely hyped. Somehow, this side series had become a main draw of Nintendo's for me. I had only played Mario primarily. I hadn't really gotten into Zelda, Fire Emblem, or Xenoblade yet, so you can bet I was on Luigi's Mansion 3 immediately. I didn't really like it though, until I played it to completion a few years later and then fell in love with it, the same way I had with Dark Moon. Once Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was announced as a remaster, I was relatively excited. I worried about the price, the graphics, and most of all my nostalgia. I had developed a mythologizing of Dark Moon and didn't know how it could hold up in HD, and under a new name, in the current year. Later on, Nintendo announced the price, and though I still wanted it, I held off. Full price for a 3DS game in HD that I got for less than half was an impossible proposition for me. I feel the same way about the recent Donkey Kong Country Returns remaster too. Luckily, Nintendo put Luigi's Mansion 2 HD on sale last week, and I bought it. I was in the middle of another game, Final Fantasy VII Remake by the way, and for some reason chose to pause my playthrough right before the ending to play Luigi's Mansion 2 again. I don't have the slightest clue why I did that, but I did, and I don't know if I regret it yet. I loved Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon when I played it, and I love what I played on my Switch. Here's why. Luigi's Mansion 2 does a bit to change up the formula. It made sense to make the game levels based on a portable console that people would play on a car ride to school for 15 minutes, or on the bus for 10. In this sense, changing the game from an open-ended adventure to a more linear and repetitive journey was understandable. In fact, it was the highlight of the game for me when I was younger. These bite-sized levels are fun, and because the worlds aren't incredibly long, I never tired of their theming, or the backtracking. Due to the way the game was structured, there isn't all too much backtracking either. You head forward and always get to where Professor Egad was guiding you. The only reason not to would have been to collect gems, cash, or search for a boo. I still enjoy this setup today. Maybe I don't like it as much as 3's because I think generally 3 is a better game now. Regardless, I also liked this one. How much of that is nostalgia? Who knows? But I liked Dark Moon, and 2HD is Dark Moon but easier on the eyes. Simply put, there is always progression in these levels. It was easier to follow a tutorial when I got stuck back then, since I could just type the name of the level and in minutes get past the puzzle. Retrospectively, I can acknowledge the issues with the level-based format, and how it did remove much of the series' identity. This was during the bland era of Mario, though I'd argue this game wasn't bland. In fact, it's rather expressive and almost akin to a cartoon with how the ghosts are animated. The ghosts are also simply fun. There's not a ton, but this was a 3DS game developed on what was likely a fraction of the budget of the original. This game would have been the basis of what Next Level would do with Luigi's Mansion 3, and I think everyone can commend what the studio built up to. I played part of the first Luigi's Mansion when it came to 3DS. I enjoyed it but got stuck and moved on to software on the Switch. So for me, Luigi's Mansion was a series with levels, and the first game was the outlier. Now obviously that wasn't the case, but when I played the third game, I had a shock, because it was different from the second, and closest to the one I didn't particularly click with. Luigi's Mansion 2 also added a lot more to the series. The Poltergust was greatly enhanced by Professor Egad, and overall, these improvements make the game much more rewarding to play. In Dark Moon, you had to flash the ghosts with the strobe bulb instead of a flashlight. Then you could suck them as usual, and if you pull back against the ghosts, you can click A and take great numbers off their health timer. Next Level games made the gameplay in their sequel more rewarding. There's finally some substance to gameplay outside of exploration, and exploring itself was also greatly enhanced. They added the Dark Light device, which is needed to spot boos or find hidden objects, even opening up pathways. There's so much in Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon that feels at home for the series, inclusions that aged the first game and improved the third. This middle child in the series did more for Luigi's Mansion than most Nintendo titles that went to the handheld, excluding maybe Pokemon and Kid Icarus. What Next Level games did in their Luigi's Mansion games was extensively improve the gameplay, and the start of those improvements came from this game. Of course, the gameplay doesn't matter if the game or the levels aren't fun, and that's where Dark Moon always had some trouble, and where 2HD didn't improve upon. Dark Moon's levels are fun, they're surprisingly inventive, and well worth going through troubles to explore. Where the game didn't excel was small instances during these levels, be it a boss fight or mini-boss. Specifically little moments, such as the Three Sisters ghosts or the very first boss fight. Once you know their pattern, or figure the puzzle out, these encounters become easier, but there's just an unenjoyable aspect to them. Most of the boss fights aren't enjoyable. They weren't enjoyable during my first playthrough almost 8 years ago, and they aren't enjoyable today. They're generally cheesy, and there's too many unfair moments in between. For example, the Ice Monster. I hated this boss battle when I first played it, and hated it today just as much. It's not fun, it's simply cheesy. What's the point of putting a time limit on it? Or the boss refreshing his health? Or limiting the amount of bombs you can use? Or making the hitboxes obviously busted? Or allowing the boss to go so far away to make explosions consistently miss? I beat it on my third or fourth try, but my play session had already been ruined. It was not fun, nor was it enjoyable, the same as most of the other bosses. At least those didn't exclusively rely on luck and had patterns, and some strategy to them. They weren't good boss fights, but the puzzles were okay, and the attack patterns were fine. Contrasting the bosses, the basic ghosts are all fun to go against. I loved the greenies, slammers, hiders, and creepers. The only bad ghosts to go against are the sneakers. Not because they're particularly difficult to evade, but because they're nearly impossible to capture. At least they're that way for trying to get some gold bars. 2HD could have added something to improve these, maybe slowing down certain enemies or making it easier to capture them. One of my biggest worries I had with Luigi's Mansion 2HD was whether the game would hold up, be it gameplay or visually. I think it did both moderately well. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was always a polished looking game. It always had a clean look to it, so the Switch version cleaned up nicely too. The game has a quaint look. It doesn't look as impressive as 3, but it does look good. Honestly to me, replaying the game had a nostalgic quality. Graphically, it certainly did, and the gameplay too. The lack of a 3D effect is a big downside here. I didn't love the 3D feature on the 3DS with most software, rarely it was used, but with Dark Moon it helped with the scale of the game. It was easier to consistently understand where you were with Luigi. The lack of the 3D feature in 2HD is a downgrade for sure, but not the biggest downside to the remaster. The downside is how lacking the remaster was with new features or anything, outside of online play for Scarescraper. This is a bare minimum remaster without any content. Something surprising considering the developer, Tantalus, did a great job in the past on Skyward Sword HD and their other work. If you just wanted to replay Luigi's Mansion 2, like I did, this is fine, but if you're new to the series, it's hard to praise. There could have been so much more done. Looking back, do I wish there was more here? Without a doubt, this could have been a fantastic modernization of Dark Moon, and instead was only the best version available because it had online play and is in HD on modern hardware. If there's one thing I'm glad about with regards to the game, it's that it gave me the chance to play a game I loved when I was younger, which allowed me to look back at a list of memories with it. I'm glad I replayed Luigi's Mansion 2. It held up to my memories, and I had a fun time playing again. I felt my memories had held up, and generally my fears about the remaster didn't come to pass. It's a good enough remaster that doesn't do much. It's without a doubt the best version available, better than the 3DS's. If you're wondering though if you should replay it, you should. If you also have similar nostalgia with the game as I did, then you definitely should play it again. If you're trying to get into Luigi's Mansion, play the third game first. It's on sale every now and then, and is also quite enjoyable. It's an incredible game, and 2 is certainly a step down, even with nostalgia goggles. But if you've played 3 already, and want to play 2, then you should. It's worth replaying, and it's worth playing for the first time, just not at double the price of the original. Thanks for watching! The idea for this video came immediately after playing the game for a couple of hours. Now I'm going to work on some bigger videos. Thank you so much for watching as I took a trip down 3DS era memory lane. I hope you enjoyed the video, leave a like if you want to, comment some thoughts, or subscribe for more. I hope you check out one of the videos on screen right now. Thanks again.